Hi everyone, welcome to Padikapeon, the Greek-Ukrainian podcast. I'm your host Ilya. In this podcast we have here with us Nataliya Dovhopol. Nataliya is a Ukrainian author of several books in historical fiction, adventure fiction, romance and more. Nataliya has been living in Athens, Greece for many years. She's an active member of civil society and in her books, Find the Country of the Amazons, Spies from the Artemis Shelter, she has managed to combine both Greek and Ukrainian culture. For her work, she has been awarded multiple prizes, such as the Mythology Prize in 2022, and I'm very happy to have her with us.
Українці і греки.
From simply hanging on.
Πατρίδα, ελευθερία, δημοκρατία. Μην σιωπήσετε. Ακολουθήστε το δρόμο της καρδιάς. Βοηθήστε όπως μπορεί ο καθένας τους Ουκρανούς.
Nataliya, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Hello, everybody.
Nataliya, just for people to get to know you a bit, could you tell us a bit about you? Could you introduce yourself?
Well, I am originally from Kiev. I've been studying tourism there. Then I studied art and culture because for many years I was a part of the historical dance theater. And that's quite unique group. The thing that we actually reenacted and made it very close to the viewer, different styles like medieval dances and Renaissance and all that. So I really had my passion in history and culture, and I combined it with arts. And that was something that I really loved. But in parallel, I was also doing some work with youngsters because I worked in the state institution and different NGOs that we try to support the young people and do the work with them. So that was another passion of mine. And the festivals also, like organization of the festivals and stuff. And I always liked writing, but I never really had time for it. And I never really had... I will be published. I'm sure that I will be published. So I will finish this book and I will do it really, really nice. So I had some other things that I could do and I could be cool with those things. But after I moved to Greece, it was the first time, it was about 9 years ago. And that's when I met my future husband. And then I asked myself a question. Okay, you're so cool in Ukraine. You know everybody. You're in this all activism, civic activism and culture. But what can you do in Greece? So it was really time for me when I felt like when you move to a foreign country, and you don't have a job right away, you're not invited for some professional development, it's really hard to have the self-realization, to do what you like and to really bring something to the world. And then I thought, okay, so what can I do? What can I do well? I can write. And I decided to become a writer. So it was exactly like this. I made this decision. And I was working for a year and a half, I think almost 2 years. I've been just writing every day as going for work. And that was a thing when I felt that, okay, I do something important, even though I had no idea if all those texts would ever be published. But I tried and I learned the Ukrainian market, book market, and I tried to participate in all the competitions. And eventually I won one of the biggest Ukrainian competitions for the manuscript. I got the second place with this book, Spies from the Artemis Shelter. And it got the second prize, and 3 publishers wanted suddenly to work with me. So this is how my writing career started. And Greece really was a challenge for me. But it was also a starting point for this. So to bring all my knowledge, because I was also in science in Ukraine, so I was doing the culture studies on professional level. But here I could do it all, but tell about culture and history and everything that I'm so passionate about to the reader, and especially to the young reader. So basically I combine everything that I really liked. And here in Greece, for many years, mostly I was writing and I was going back and forth. But then the invasion started, the full-scale invasion. And after that, I could not really think of myself as a writer, because who needs a writer when it's a war?
Before we go there, so let's delve into this a little bit. So you have a passion for history, I can imagine ancient history, and you fuse Ukrainian and Greek culture together. This comes from your passions when you were a child, I guess, when you were a student. But I'm wondering, how do you actually materialize that in your books?
Okay, one of my most favorite books in my childhood, it was The Myth of the Ancient Greece. So that was basically everything that I knew about Greece. It's the mythology, the stories, and later at university it was the culture of ancient Greece. But I had no idea what happened to Greece after, even like Roman times, Byzantium, and so on. I had no idea about Ottomans and what it is. So my first meeting with Athens was at Omonia, when I come out from the metro station. And imagine, it was 9 years ago, so actually it was worse. and I'm like, okay, and where are the gods? Where are the gods who I imagined? Where is the Olympus? So it was some cultural shock on one hand. On the other hand, I felt there is so many things to tell to Ukrainians and to Greeks. And there are so many things that connect us. Our cultures are much more connected than I ever thought of. And this realization was stroking for me at first. I was thinking, how can I make Greek culture closer for Ukrainian people, and also vice versa? Maybe at some point I will be able to tell these stories in Greek, to share it with Greek people. So in this story about my spice girls, they travel all around the world. So it's a really adventurous story, something like Jules Verne traveling at the beginning of the century, of the 20th century. And one of the points where the girls come is Andros. Because I was on Andros, I know how it is, I liked it, so why not? And I just put girls like in the States, where I lived at some point, in Japan, where I also lived for a few months, in Kiev, and Greece. And it was really interesting for me to explore how you take the same year and what was happening in the world in the same year, and how our culture's history is connected. And later I went, deeper, and also to the ancient history and how Greek historians, like Herodotus, how you say it in English, yes?
Herodotus.
Herodotus, yes. How he described Scyth and the Ukrainian lands, and later how these legends were taken by Cossacks, by Polish nobles, also how they were interpreting all this myths about Scyths and Amazons and Sarmas, and it went to the later history. And this is something that really amazes me, but how to tell it to people. And for me, it's interesting to tell a fun story, an emotional story, and all this history and culture would be on the background. But I know that I would make a really, really good background, which would be historically accurate, and which would bring something fulfilling to the reader. And one of the latest stories that I wrote, it's called Lefke. So basically, it's about the Snake Island, which is quite famous now. It's the Fidonisi, it used to be called also, the one where we know about the Russian ship, go and do something with yourself. So this island was a very important part of ancient world. Not ancient. We were talking about already about Roman times, Byzantium. So the ancient world, medieval times. There was a temple of Achilleus. And later it was also a point where people stopped on the way to the other trading cities. And this is why it had a lot of legends. And when I started digging into those legends, there's so much connection with Greek mythology. This is something that I adored. So when I was a child, I couldn't imagine that we had so much of Greek mythology on modern Ukraine, yes, on the lands of Ukraine. The same like with the temples in Crimea, with the temples and the Greek settlements in the south of Ukraine. And this story, that's a very, very significant and a mark in everything that is happening, that it was a part of a book collection. It's called Motanka, and it's about a woman in war. And it's a fantasy, science fiction, alternative history collection written by 12 women. And this was one of the books that was burned in Kharkiv when it was already almost ready to
be published.
Yes,
to be manufactured.
Yes, so it was already in paper and with covers, and it was blown by Russians.
We will talk later about this. I'm just curious because it's really cool. I'm also fascinated with the stories about how ancient Greece connects with ancient Ukraine. And for example, I think in Greece we don't realize how important Ukrainian wheat was for the Athenians during the Peloponnesian War, but also not only during that time. For example, at school, we learn about a specific battle in Potamos where the Spartans won the Athenians, and it was right on the trade route from Ukraine to Athens. And that's when, after that naval battle, it was when Sparta took the lead and basically won over the strategy of Pericles, which was basically to have the walls around Athens, keep the navy open, keep the supplies from Ukraine open, and then see what to do. You mentioned also Achilles, who he belonged to the Mycenean civilization, which is the first Greek civilization in the territory of Greece. Before that, we had some pre-Greek people, and it's fascinating to me how the connection of Greece and Ukraine starts already from that old age. I was curious, right? This is not part of the questions I prepared, but I'm really curious. What other connection do you find in Greek and Ukrainian mythology? What about the Scythes or the Sarmates or the ancient Greek cities? For example, Padikapei, which is the name of the podcast. But let's focus on the mythology, which is where we also have a passion for. Could you tell us a few more connections?
My favorite is myth about Iphigeneia, and actually it has so many versions. And I don't know which is like of course, it could be more speculation on something from the ancient text than some later text, but still there are a lot of different versions. So you remember, again, we are going to Mycenean culture because Iphigeneia was actually the Mycenean princess. And if you remember, she was supposed to be killed and sacrificed to Artemis, but suddenly Artemis made a deer out of her, made her a deer. And later, Iphigeneia appears in Crimea. So she appears in the temple of Artemis as the priestess of Artemis. And later, her brother Orestes, he's looking for her But he could not find her, and at some point, he and his friends, they have, I don't remember, either crash or something. But anyway, they come to the settlement of where is her Artemis temple and where is Iphigeneia. And with the rules of this settlement, of this temple also, they have to kill all the strangers, and they have to give them as the sacrifice to Artemis. And Iphigeneia has to kill them, but then she sees that it's her brother, so they decide to escape together. And they take some artifact from the temple, and they come back to Greece, and they go to Bravrona, and this is where they establish the new Artemis temple. So you can also, in Bravrona, you can also find the little temple of Iphigeneia.
Wow. So just for the listeners who don't know, when the Myceneans wanted to go to Troy and they had assembled all their fleet, there was no wind, so they said to the king of the Myceneans, Agamemnon, that he needs to sacrifice his daughter Iphigeneia for a wind to blow so they can go to Troy. And he eventually did. So Iphigeneia then turns into a deer, and she magically
appears
in Crimea. And then she turns from a deer to a human. And how do we know this? What's the source?
Actually, I cannot remember right now, but this is the thing, that we have quite many different sources, and we have many different versions of the same thing. So it's amazing that I always, when I was a kid, I wanted to have a story. Like, it would be the one proven story. For example, Artemis is the goddess of hunting, period. That's it. And now I understand, okay, so, because I was going through the Artemis temples specifically, because I had this also in my book, so I had to make research. For example, a temple in Ephesus is dedicated to Artemis Kybella, kind of Kybella, because it had some other connections there. And it's about Earth, it's about the harvest. The Artemis, which is in Bravrona, is the patroness of women who want to have children, of young maids also. There was kind of a school for the maids in this temple. So again, it's different face of Artemis. And this is amazing. Like in Epidavros, there is Artemis Ekati. So it's chthonic goddess connected to death. And it's the same Artemis. So my point is that we have so many versions of the same stories, because yes, we don't know, not always we know if it's a right story, but something that is told us by ancient historians. Like we cannot say that our dear Homer didn't tell us the stories that he invented, for example, right? Or he heard this version in one village, but in other village, it could be totally different versions. And this is amazing, and this is fascinating, because something, at first I thought it should be just one version, and that would be the true. But there is no really true when we talk about ancient history. There is so much speculation about it. But also, it's nice that I can work with this as the author and not as a historian. And this is why I'm not in science anymore, but I can play with all these things.
Yeah, it's interesting because, both the Iliada and the Odyssea, the two kind of books, or basically series of poems from Homer, they were verbally transmitted to handed over to generations, so this story about Iphigeneia can be just a verbal story. Okay, pretty cool, very interesting. So you use these myths in your books and you combine them with the modern world and you try to make something fun and interesting and create an interesting plot. Could you tell us an example of a plot without spoiling too much from your books?
Okay, from the latest one, which I'm still working on, that the thing will be in Athens. So everything's gonna be happening in Athens. And we will have a Ukrainian girl, we need the connection, right? Who suddenly reads an article that a famous Greek writer wrote a book which she has already written. So he kind of stole her book. And she's coming to Greece to meet him and to talk what's going on. So this is actually the very mysterious story because it's connected to Orphics. And this is something that was a big research for me because I knew nothing about it. But I really like the idea of Eleusinian mysteries, Dionysus mystery, and the same Orphics mystery. And the idea of Orphics was that they remember their previous lives. So it's like I'm telling you just the beginning of the story, but how it's all get connected, I still don't know how to tell the story without spoilers. But I think it's something that is fun because it's in modern Athens, and it's something that I really want to transmit to Ukrainian reader, the spirit of modern Athens. And also the story of some ancient traditions, of some ancient myths. This is basically a story of Orpheus and Eurydice, but in the modern world.
Okay, that's cool. That's really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, there was a religion of Orpheus to the northeast of Thrace, and maybe it went all the way up to Ukraine. I'm not sure, but
this is what I read. But again, it's sometimes it's hard to find the exact source to know that it's proven. So I saw it in some scientific articles, so like I can more or less trust it. But yes, I heard that Orpheus cult was also in Olbia, in the Greek town Polis in south of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. We could talk about myths all day. I'm also a groupie, so so when we were talking in the phone the last time, you told me that unfortunately, while one of your latest books was being produced in Kharkiv, the printing house was bombed, and there was a lot of reporting about it in international media. And my question is, how did this affect you, your book launch, but also the people that you know, the people you collaborate with? What happened there?
Of course, it was a big shock for all industry and for all Ukrainians who care about culture. And lately, there are more and more people who do care and do read. And this is something very interesting phenomena of how Russian-Ukrainian war and the prohibition of Russian books finally boosted the Ukrainian book market and also boosted interest of people to Ukrainian books. And they're like, oh, okay, so actually I can read in Ukrainian as well as I could read in Russians, because like some people who were raised in Soviet Union and they remember about this, like, okay, good books could be only translated in Russian because there was the better translators, there were more money in the industry, and there were always more books coming from Russia or in Russian translation. But now we have a blossom of Ukrainian book market. This is true. This is like the numbers are crazy. And now the new Ukrainian authors started getting published, something that in my time, even 5 years ago, I could only dreamt of. And now I see so many new names. And with all of this, we know that most of the publishing houses and generally publishing industry is concentrating in Kharkiv. And Kharkiv, it has some fame of being kind of a more Russificated city where people speak Russian and stuff. But Kharkiv actually was in the 1930s, it was a capital of Ukrainian literature. There was a huge special house where the Ukrainian writers lived. It had and it still has a very strong philological school. So Kharkiv is a hub for Ukrainian publishing. And also the biggest publishing companies and printing houses located there. So it's just across the border from Russia, and they got bombed very, very often. Even though they really get bombed all the time, and in the center, in the industrial objects, they still working. This is crazy for me because at least two of my publishers who I work very closely now are in Kharkiv. And also this printing house, Factor Druk, that was bombed. It was bombed there in Kharkiv. And it was something very big for Ukrainian industry because most of the books, or a big percent of the books, were published actually there. And also not just fiction or books like this, but also the school books, the books for children that the study books, So it was a huge loss. And I felt physical pain when I saw the pictures of the books, of my book, burnt. And you understand that it's genocide, and this is not only about the territory, it's about culture. This is something that they really want to have. Control Ukrainian culture. Let it be, but let it be in the what we want, how we want. We want to say, we have these amazing Ukrainian songs. These are very rustic, they are not very smart and intelligent, but it's very nice, very pretty. Let's have also Ukrainian songs, and this is our minority. This is what I feel like. It's general. What is that word? This is how Ukrainian culture has been treated for ages. Like something minor, something very village-like, which is sweet but not important. And we forget that basically in 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, culture from Kiev with the church came to Moscow. So this is also a connection that we rarely make. And Russian culture is heavily based on something that we worked on Ukrainian lands and in our academies.
So the motive in bombing the printing house in Kharkiv was a dark one.
Look, we cannot say the motives because we don't know the motives. It could be that they bombed all the big businesses to scare people, to give the panic, to put down economy. But it could also be that they did it because it's Ukrainian publishing house. And it's bombing not economy, but also culture. But definitely it was a specific target. So it was not just on the way to...
By accident.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's I can tell for sure.
And what you're saying is basically that there is a war also on Ukrainian art and literature, which is strategically planned, basically.
And imagine that on the occupied territories, the Ukrainian books are burned. Then they bring Russian books, but also they made books in Ukrainian, children books in Ukrainian, with their own propaganda. This is totally crazy for me. And imagine how much investment they put in this. And generally in spreading great Russian culture. We still say great Russian culture, though I don't know why we still use this stereotype, because basically great Russian culture is based on is based on praising little person who does bad things. But okay, let's understand. Let's understand Raskolnikov. He is not that bad person. He just killed old woman, her neighbor, but he's not a bad person. It's okay. And if you analyze Russian texts, this is what great Russian culture is based on.
Yeah. Let's go back to Ukraine and the culture. Indeed, I hear that many say that the Russo-Ukrainian war has led to an unprecedented rediscovery of Ukrainian culture with events, movies, podcasts like this, books, and other cultural products. So could you visualize this a little bit for us? Could you tell us about arts, literature, how this full-scale invasion has made Ukrainian culture so brighten up?
Yeah, first of all, it's the interest of people, common people, to own culture. That is something that I mentioned already, but it's a scale, and it starts from some silly pop songs, something that helps you to survive, and something that even at first these songs were really helping people to keep their mind. Because they were songs about bayraktars, for example, and we even called this bayraktarshchina. So it's like a feature that we struggle to fight with what we have around, with quite bad, let's say, badly made culture. But it still was very pro-Ukrainian. It was pro-people. So it was very interesting thing that the first year appeared in 2022, and later it became deeper and deeper, because you cannot base your culture on some silly things. And people who never worked with Ukrainian culture and who were singing in Russian all their lives, don't know any form of art, like they were doing it in Russian language and also thinking about Russian audience, suddenly started thinking, no, we'll do it for Ukrainians. Only for Ukrainians, we will concentrate on that. But later it started growing. The understanding started growing. So we're going deeper and deeper into learning who we are, where are the roots, why it's happening like this. So there are more and more analyses and really great podcasts, and people analyze all the things that are around us, and especially the connection with Russian and Ukrainian culture. And I also focus on that a lot, because this is something that we always had over our head. We had that big brother, and we were ashamed to speak our language. We were ashamed to do our culture. And it was really shame. My mother came to Kiev from the village, and they all speak Ukrainian. And she came to Kiev, and she had a nickname, Ukrainian. And it was kind of a bad nickname, because she spoke Ukrainian and she didn't learn to speak Russian yet.
That happened in Kiev.
Sorry?
That happened in Kiev, when she went to Kiev.
It happened in Kiev in 70s. 60s. So that is something we start rethinking our history. We start thinking which language spoke our grandmother, and why my grandmother had to learn speaking Russian, because she had to survive. Otherwise, she would not mend it. It was not cool to speak Ukrainian. And not only speak, we had these repressions. First wave, it was Stalin repressions in 30s, where most of the Ukrainian writers, generally cultural workers, were killed. And then we had the second wave in the 60s. So we had other repressions where the people were also arrested for doing art. Very good example now. We have this show. It's a musical. They made it a very modern style, with some rap, with some rock, about these writers who lived in Kharkiv House of Writers. It's called Slovo. So it's a musical called House Slovo. And they dedicated this musical for them. They took their poems and they made it very fun and modern. And many people just learned about them now, because we didn't study it at school. in 90s, my school program were still Soviet. My foreign literature was mostly based on Russian books still. And now we are getting more and more acknowledged what we actually had. And the other thing is supporting Crimea Tatar culture, which is also very important for us. And it's great that we have this collaboration, and basically from 2014, from the time when Crimea was occupied. And it's also state support, as much as state now can support, but also there are many initiatives that support the language, the culture. But also for me, it's important to support other ethnoses that are in Ukraine, such as Upper Azovian Greeks, or they are also called Mariupol Greeks. And this is also something that I feel myself connected, though I have no connection to Mariupol and to the Greeks there. But now I meet these people, and I am in Greece, and I feel this is one of the bridges that we can make, something that we have to preserve, this traditional culture, which is preserved better and better now in the wartime, because there are more and more interest about this.
I find it interesting because apart from the Mariupol Greeks, I also heard that there are ethnic Greeks also in Crimea.
Actually, it was recently, the 8th of August. There was a date when Russian Imperatrice, who was Ekaterina at that time, I guess, she replaced Urums and Romeis, the two ethnicities, from Crimea to Mariupol. So it was the first forced displacement of Mariupol Greeks. Actually, they got this name, Upper Azovian Greeks or Mariupol Greeks. So they had to leave their country, their land, because the Russian imperialistic thought decided this would be a better, to clean Crimea from locals. Of course, there are some Greeks left there, or they came back. There are so many people who were coming back, especially in 90s, when they could move more freely. Also when Tatars came back in 90s, many Greeks were also moving. And now it's the similar situation because, they have their new home in Mariupol, and actually it's like Mariupol and villages around, which they have their dialects. So there are two languages, Romanian and Urumian. Romanian is actually based on Greek. And you can feel ancient Greek vibe. And Urumian, it's based on Turks group of language. But both of them are Christians. This is why they formed this kind of big ethnic name as Nadazovski Greki, or of course Upper Azovian Greeks. And they were forced to leave again because war came to Mariupol. And again, Russian imperialism came to push them to other lands. Now there are many in Kiev, there are many in Greece. That was also sad for me that I felt that many of them came to Greece and they said, we thought we had this connection with Greece because we learned Greek language, also new Greek language, a part of their dialects. We had this celebrations, very similar to what we have here in Greece.
And when they came, they were not welcomed as warmly as they expected.
Exactly. Yes. And it's super hard now to get Greek passport. Some years ago, it was very easy. You have to say that you have some Greek roots and they would just take another passport. Here is a second one. But now it's impossible.
Yeah. What do you think is that? Why? And on top of that, how do you think that Greece in general, the state and the society, you can analyze as you want, how do we see what is happening now?
I feel that some people still don't want to really get into it. They don't want to really understand what's going on. It's easy to say it's a war between Russia and NATO. That's it. Like, even they would say between Russia and America, of course, like, because America sometimes seems to be the worst enemy of Greece. When you talk to people, it's like America is the worst, actually. It's the hell of the world. You're like, seriously? I feel, you can prove me wrong, but I feel that Greeks have this dream that never came true, dream about communism. And sometimes it's all full of pink elephants. I'm going too deep to Greek history now. They were waiting actually for support for Soviet Union, and this support never came. So I'm thinking, like, okay, Russia betrayed you so many times, since Russia claimed to be the next generation of the Soviet Union. But why you still trust this country? And okay, they have a strong leader. Nice. We also need a strong leader. So it doesn't matter is it Stalin or Putin, but it's a strong leader. So this is something that I can kind of understand and go through it, analyze it. But of course, I can't accept. And of course, there are many people who are supporting Ukrainians here. But still, they don't want to go deeper and to understand that, no, we are not a part of Russia. No, we are an independent state. You try to give some examples, like, okay, so what would you do if Turkey decides to invade Chios? Would you say it's okay? Or what would you say if the neighbor comes to your house and say, it's my house now? This is a very simple thing to understand that the Russian invasion is not okay, and it's not the war with America; it's a war with Ukraine.
What about the supportive aspect of Greece? What about tell me about it.
Okay. When the invasion started, first I was volunteering, mostly in giving the informational support, something that I know how to do, and I felt like I could do that in the social media and establish some new social media. So for Ukrainians and for Greeks to translate the needs, what is really needed to be sent to Ukraine or to local people here, to the first refugees. And later it became a job for me. So I was working at the info point of the United Ukrainian Diaspora. So it was even information and coordination center, I would say, because it's like we really connected Greek and international NGOs, some governmental structure, and Ukrainian diaspora with the beneficiaries, with the people who fled from war. The biggest support basically was from NGO. That was the first biggest thing that we experienced, but NGOs also did not know what to do because still Ukrainian people were a bit different from the people from other refugees who were coming from the eastern and southern countries. Because most of the people, they were educated, they really wanted to work at once. So this is why they were coming and asking us, so what we can do and how we can do it better. So it was a great work that we did from the very beginning. Of course, now the finance from NGOs and for NGOs is very small. So it's now people hopefully who could find their jobs. And it was also good that, as in other European states, here they got their temporary protection, that from the first day that they applied. It was very fast. This was amazing. Comparing to some other European countries, like here, you could receive it in one day, this card. So in one card, one day you receive your AMCA, and you can go to have official job the next day. Of course, you have to go through other hells of bureaucracy, like opening bank account and other things, but at least it was a legal status, so it was helping. And the transportation in Athens and in some other areas were free for people at some point from the beginning. So now, yes, people can work, but still, if you are accountant, you cannot prove your degree. Also, you need to know language very well. Even if the person who had their own shop, bakery for 20 years in Ukraine, this person cannot just easily open the business, even with money, baking business in Athens, because there are so many bureaucratic procedures, there are so many specific licenses that you have to have. This is why, with this huge flow of talented and educated people in Greece, this talented and educated people has to do odd jobs, some illegal jobs, just to get money, because they cannot work in the full scale, even though they could have, even with some basic Greek or with English that many of them knew. So proof of diploma and licenses, that was a big obstacle and is still. I really, really feel these people. There were a few places where Ukrainians could stay, and they still can stay. So basically there are two camps. One in Thessaloniki, actually not Thessaloniki, but closer to the border with Bulgaria in Ceres, and another one in Elefsina. So there are only two state camps. And at some point, because it always were the waves, it was also full. Now people try to be on their own and search for something else, but there are still some Ukrainian people who live in these camps for this support. As for financial support, there is none. Like in some other European countries, you would not receive money for living. The only thing that you can receive is Helios program, Helios, which is state program. It's managed by state, but also they have NGOs who do the work, like a field work, and help to do all the bureaucratic procedure. So this is a subsidy for apartment. So you can rent an apartment. Then the state will give you money for this apartment for 1 year. The program is quite good, even though it's also the whole bureaucratic circle, because at first you have to find this flat, find a person who would be eager to give you for 1 year, rent. And so everything must be official. And also you have to pay first, and then the state will give you money back. So you also have to come here with some investments. If you come with nothing, that would be quite hard to survive in Greece.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know about that, actually. Interesting. Cool. And lastly, could you tell us a little bit about your life in Greece? You said you're living almost 9 years, right? How has your life been? 9 years in Athens, basically.
Okay, so from the life of expat, generally, it depends on you, how your life is. It depends how active you are, how you try to maintain. And for me, of course, all this time, it was really different, because part of it was COVID, part of it was the full-scale invasion, which was also some very different period of my life. But first, when I came, I felt really restricted and I didn't want to learn Greek language, to get into Greek culture, to search for the jobs, because even though I was not a forced refugee, as people come now, I felt like it was not completely my choice. So this is also a difficult thing of when you move to another country. You have to really understand that it's your choice and what you want to do here. I worked with youth in the Greek NGO. I found some new really, really good friends. And when you have friends, everything seems quite different. The country is not that hostile. because you have things to do. You are getting active, and you're learning the language also. Actually, things helped me to get into the Greek culture and into the life. I started doing the free walking tours around Athens, but eventually I had to stop it. And then I started doing ancient Greek dances, which is also something unique. And it was in Dora Strato Theater, so it was something that I combined my passion and things that I could find here in Athens. And this is how I started slowly getting into. We have some dreams, let's say. We don't have it as an exact plan. Or it works like every 3 months I go to Ukraine for some time. And last time I was in Ukraine for 1 month almost. And I was touring with my books, and I was visiting my families, enjoying, as much as I could enjoy life there. And coming back here, I'm also trying to take the best from Greece that I can. That's a Greek summer, and explore amazing spots. Like recently we went to Archeos Epidavros, and I think it's a really, really nice spot, not popular with tourists, not crowded. So this is why I liked it a lot, and full of history. And Archeos Epidavros will definitely appear in my book. And that was one of the points why I went there too. So it's a town by the sea. It's not just the Epidavros theater. So there is much more about it. And now I'm actually very excited. I really want to see some other locations and to travel. And I'm waiting my Ukrainian friends to come and to go to Poros. So something that I also can share. I really like sharing my positive reflections of Greek culture with friends who come.
Perfect. Nataliya, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation. It was really nice to talk to you.